Everyone, I'm Sandra Bargman. A few years ago, I wrote and performed a solo show called The Edge of Every Day, which was an exploration of the rough edges and contradictions we all face and grapple with. The show hit a nerve, and the relevance of the topic would only grow over time, more than I could have foreseen. So, here we are. Real talk with real people, sharing stories and perspectives that spark provocative invitations to leap out of what's safe, on the edge of every day. Thanks for listening. Hello, everyone. We are live in the hive. Thank you for joining me on this, the 43rd episode of The Edge of Every Day here on talkradio.nyc. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, and for those of you who don't know me yet, I encourage you to check out my bio on talkradio.nyc, or of course, you can visit my website, sandrabargman.com. And please tune in to any of my previous episodes with my inspiring guests. As my loyal listeners know, this show is about celebrating triumphs, pushing boundaries, and exploring rough edges. Through conversations and shared stories with friends and colleagues, it's my hope that we can begin to understand our edges. And what I mean by edges is those places where we are fearful, those places where we are resistant to change, those places where paradoxes and contradictions live in our beliefs and understandings, both about ourselves and the world around us, those places we don't want to look. Listen, we live in turbulent times, and we are coming to understand that life simply isn't black or white. It must be an embrace of both. And the more we recognize our own edges and get real about them, the more we can help others to do the same. And that, I fully believe, can help to change the world. So, thanks again for tuning in. And without further ado, it is time for me to introduce my guest this evening. Marianne Schnall is a journalist, author, activist, and interviewer whose work has appeared in Forbes, CNN.com, Huffington Post, Time.com, the Oprah Magazine, Marie Claire, Glamour, Women's Media Center, and many other media outlets. Her wide-ranging interviews with global leaders span fields as diverse as entertainment, politics, business, spirituality, and environmental and social activism, and include Oprah Winfrey, Maya Angelou, Melinda Gates, President Jimmy Carter, Dr. Jane Goodall, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Gloria Steinem, Sheryl Sandberg, Anita Hill, Jane Fonda, Stacey Abrams, and hundreds of others. Marianne is the founder of What Will It Take movements, whatwillitTake.com, a media collaboration, learning, and social engagement platform. And she is also the founder of feminist.com, a leading women's website and nonprofit organization that fosters awareness, education, and activism for people across the world. She serves as senior media and communications consultant to the Global Center for Gender Equality. Marianne is the author of What Will It Take to Make a Woman President? Conversations about Women, Leadership, and Power, which features interviews with politicians, public officials, thought leaders, writers, artists, and activists. Her latest books, published by Simon & Schuster, include Leading the Way, Inspiring Words for Women on How to Live and Lead with Courage, Confidence, and Authenticity, and Dare to Be You, Inspirational Advice for Girls on Finding Your Voice, Leading Fearlessly, and Making a Difference. She is the host of the podcast Shiftmakers that highlights exclusive insights of luminaries and movement makers as they share wisdom on how to be an authentic change maker today. Marianne graduated from Cornell University with a BA in English, and she is also the graduate of the Women's Media Center's Progressive Women's Voices Media and Leadership Training Program. For more information, you can find her at marianneschnall.com. Hello and welcome, Marianne.
It is wonderful to be here.
It's wonderful to have you. You know, and just to let all my listeners in, that's not her full CV. I mean, it's just incredible the work that she does. And I like a good long CV because unfortunately, within an hour, we can't possibly touch on all of the extraordinary work that you do, that my guests do. So I like to include a lot of that. So thank you. Thank you again for being a guest on The Edge of Every Day.
Thank you for having me and for that wonderful introduction.
A complete and utter pleasure. So I like to start my shows with how I know my guests. And Marianne and I met in the most unlikely of ways. So I had a very well-known photographer, headshot photographer, that lived by me in the Catskills, by my home in the Catskills, which is where I'm tuning in from today. And I get a panic phone call from him that he's got an upcoming session and his makeup artist from New York City can't come and work with him, can't come up from the city. And can I do makeup? And I said, yes, I actually can do makeup as a professional theater person who's taken that kind of training in college, etc. Yeah, I'm that level. I can do that. So I come in and I do makeup. And who walks in but Marianne with her gorgeous daughter, Jasmine. You can pick it up here.
Oh, am I supposed to tell from the evolution?
Oh, no, that you just know, and that Jasmine was wonderful, and that you and I just had a glorious conversation. And I'm learning about you and learning about Jasmine, who has turned into this extraordinary young woman, both your daughters, but I'll get to Lotus too. We're going to plug them both. And but we just forged this lovely bond over makeup and photography, which I just adore.
It's amazing how life works that way.
The universe
works. Who knew the many different twisty ways we've worked together since then? It's been really fun to bring us to this moment.
Then fast forward, I end up doing a little photography for Lotus. At the time, she's 11. Fast forward, I start to work thanks to our friendship. I work with Lotus she's a marvelous songwriter, singer-songwriter. And do you want to share a little bit about what she's going through with her music and where we can find her extraordinary music?
Yeah, no, you were so helpful. I mean, she writes in all different types of mediums, because she writes, children's books with the Jane Goodall Institute. She writes poetry, but the thing that she sort of has been her life love has been her songwriting and writing. But she'd never really been at the place to share it. And so that was this huge leap to be able to figure out how to develop and share her music. And so her work with you was completely transformational in terms of helping her get to the point where, she could bring her songs to life and to get them into the studio
and get them out in the world.
Get into now, you can find lotusk.com. She's released her first album and these singles. She's working on new music. It's been pretty incredible. And you were just, a huge part of her journey. So,
and I want to give thank you. And I want to give a shout out to Julie Last and Coldbrook Studios, she also was wonderful in the creation of those recordings and bringing that all to life. So both of your daughters are such a reflection of the work that you do, and extraordinary work. And speaking of Lotus, so now we're going to dive into you, of course. I was just back from vacation and I took What Would It Take to Make a Woman President with me on my vacation, and was reading it on the beach on Cape Cod, which was a slice of heaven. And it was written in 2013.
Yeah.
So tell the origin story, speaking of Lotus, of how that book, that incredible book, came to be.
Oh, thank you. This is another example of, how things come out of unexpected places. I had been knowing I was going to, write a book, but I wasn't sure exactly what the theme. I was playing around with a lot of different ideas. And then one day I was in the kitchen with Lotus, who was, around 8 years old. It was after Barack Obama was elected president. We were talking about how remarkable it was to have our first African-American president. And she said this very just innocent sounding question, why have we never had a woman president? And I remember, even though I've been working on these issues for, at that point, like a decade, it was kind of like, I was like, huh. And I had to really think about, why haven't we had a woman president? So it was right on the cusp. I don't know if it can be on the cusp of covering an event. I was covering a women's media center event. And I knew there were going to be all these people there. I thought it would be an interesting question to ask while I was there. So I asked everybody from Gloria Steinem and can't remember else, it's Sheryl Sandberg and all kinds. I came back, Kirsten Joe, all sorts of different people. Why haven't we had a woman president? What will it take to make a woman president? And I ran it as an article at CNN, and it just exploded and it blew up. And my agent at the time was like, "This is your book." And I was like, "This is my book?" And he was like, "Yeah, if you can get people, committed to be interviewed for the book, I think this should be your next project." So I went to longtime mentor of mine, Gloria Steinem, and I said, A, should I do this book? And B, would you be willing to be interviewed for the book? And she was like, "Yes, I'd be interviewed. And you would be a good person to do this, because you would understand that 2 points. One, that you need to look at it through all these variety of lenses. And two, that it's not just about having a woman, right? There's a lot of different layers to this, just looking at it from all these different lenses." So that I just went, and it was, it's a real mix of different people looking at this question, not just why we haven't had a woman president, but why we haven't had more women in different leadership positions, cross sectors, and just looking at how we think about leadership and power. And there's men, there's women, there's elected officials, there's artists. It's like Maya Angelou, Melissa Etheridge, Nicholas Kristof, Gloria Steinem. I can remember all the people that are in it.
Anita Hill,
yeah.
And Gavin Newsom, which I love too.
Yes.
I just love the spectrum. It Run, Don't Walk, get this book. Beyonce, of course, that was a wonderful plug that Beyonce said to all of her fans, to all of the young fans, to run, don't walk, get this book. It will absolutely inspire you to be a better leader in the world. And we've got to go
say, I have no idea how Beyonce got the book, but it's been still one of the most profound, surreal things that have ever happened to me. And I took it as a spiritual mandate that I had to do something with the book, which is why I launched my What Will It Take platform. So that
I love that.
Yeah, because I was not about selling books. I really am trying to, move this conversation forward and highlight resources that are out there to help. So,
well, and just to bring it back to Lotus and your daughters, the extraordinary, the profound simplicity of that question, and yet the big, and the legacy that you was inspired by your daughters, this incredible legacy and the give and take between the generations, and then the inspiration for the next generations. The whole story is just incredible. But we have to go to break. And when we come back, we are going to talk more about that book and your interviewing and your thoughts on women's leadership today, when we come back with Marianne Schnall on the edge of every day. Stay tuned.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business, or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant. And on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you on edge? Hey, we live in challenging, edgy times, so let's lean in. I'm Sandra Bargman, the host of The Edge of Every Day, which airs each Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc. Tune in live with me and my friends and colleagues as we share stories and perspectives about pushing boundaries and exploring our rough edges. That's The Edge of Every Day on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Chipping around, kick my brain to the ground. These are the days it never rains. But it pours on the edge of every day.
And we are back on the edge of every day with Marianne Schnall. So, Marianne, I want to ask you how you got into writing and how you got into interviewing, but we have so many questions. If you can just keep that really short. When did you know that you were this curious person that wanted to move into interviewing, to move your writing into these interviews with other people, into these extensive interviews, into the writing, the activist writing that you are doing now?
Yeah, it is a good question. You know, the funny thing is that I did start as a reporter for Us Magazine, you know, an entertainment reporter on the red carpet and doing kind of like, I don't know how to put this, like, you know, sort of frivolous type of like reporting where I'd be asking kind of not the most interesting, you know, tell me about your movie or things like that. You know, and then it was really the March for Women's Lives when I covered that and got to interview people like, you know, Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, all these people who were out there for a cause. And it became.
Excuse me, that was through Us?
No, yes.
Wow.
Right. I know.
Okay.
My memory is that I suggested covering it, not that they assigned
so
it
this
to me.
was in you already.
My grandfather was going. It's a whole other long story, and my whole family was going. And I was like, you know, I'm going to be there, and it completely changed the trajectory of my career. And everybody, Cyndi Lauper, and like Sarah Jessica Parker, Matthew Broderick. And I was like, wow, these people are here they're using their celebrity for a cause. And then I was doing the Cause Celeb column for In Style magazine, and it sort of became my thing. And I was really getting educated, like Joanne, you know, Woodward or Bette Midler about the New York Restoration Project, Meryl Streep about pesticides. And I had questions, and I was learning about issues. It just became just sort of I really was learning. And I had natural curiosity. And then also, just like you do, it was also like I was realizing I enjoy the conversation of, you know, just like I'm going to share something and they would share something. And it just became my thing. But I do sort of consider myself sort of like a little bit, I think you'd probably do too, like a conduit for like, these are very important messages and causes. And how can I write questions that will best elicit the most meaningful wisdom? I know you relate from them to, you know, help the cause, help them, help humanity and the world. So that's
Well, before I jump into that next question, I have to put this in. I so admire you and your work, and that you have been doing this and digging into all of these understandings and these issues in a way that it took the former crazy president for me to really want to dive in a more profound way. I mean, if we can say anything about that presidency, how he lit the fire for women I was never shy about staying abreast of politics or being vocal about my opinions, but how I've dug into the issues and where I had blinders and what bubbles I lived in was extraordinary. And you've been on the front lines of this for over 20 years. So I admire your work greatly. And on that note, who was your first big interview? You just rattled off a whole bunch of names, but who was your first?
Oh my God.
Can you remember?
I mean, there've been so many, because again, and then I almost like the people I did first, I don't sort of count that, because obviously I interviewed some cool people for that, but it was like the deep interviews.
Right.
Probably, I feel like one of the very first really big ones was probably Gloria Steinem, honestly,
And
who I've now
dramatically.
interviewed, I feel like maybe 20 times, over the years. There's a lot of people like that I've interviewed, like serial interviews, like Maya Angelou twice, and like V. Enzler, probably also like 15. And that's like, which I really enjoy because we've all been on our journeys together.
And become friends.
Yeah, Oprah twice, it has a little bit of a familiarity, like how you and I have a familiarity, which is nice. And you can kind of pick up where you left off, and you've both grown. Yes. So it's so hard to say. I've interviewed so many.
Right. Well, speaking of grown, what have you learned from all of these iconic change makers? What that you've interviewed, what are your favorite nuggets of wisdom that you've gleaned? And that's a huge question, I realize, but go for it.
And I literally actually have, you're right, I have learned so much. So I can't possibly list them all, because I actually feel like so much of who I am as a person has come. And don't even ask my daughters. I'm constantly around being like, as Jane Fonda said, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be whole. Or, Maya Angelou will say. So I'm constantly going off with, little, or Anna Huffington says, that's just your obnoxious roommate in your head. I'm constantly quoting like little things. But what was the question? I really do feel that one of the things that has been most meaningful that I've learned has been that, we're taught in life to almost just, shudder to think about all the things that you're going to, go through, that the thing you have to avoid all of these, crises or things that might happen in your life, but it's the obstacles and it's the difficult times that, in my experience, having interviewed some incredible change makers, are those very things where you learn the most about yourself. That is something that Maya Angelou said to me, that, every time you get down, getting back up, it shows you who you are. But that also this concept of, which is something I got from V, formerly Eve Enzler, who's founder of V-Day, the concept of turning pain into power. I just, in fact, tomorrow, a piece that I wrote, hopefully tomorrow, the day after, with Congresswoman Cori Bush, if you know who she is, she has an amazing memoir out. And these are people who have been through traumas, and what they've learned from it, and then they've used it to make them stronger. But also, she's now out there, she is the first Black woman to represent Missouri in Congress, but she's now taking her lived experience and it's informing her policy. Or the people that I speak to, like, just all the different ways that you can sort of use your experience in order to help others, but to also just, develop kind of your courage and your strength and your sense of who you are. So I think that's a really big one. I think the other thing that really I took away, because, you're taught that we should all sort of strive for fame and fortune, that's and then I speak to these celebrities And some of them, the one that always sticks with me is Natalie Portman, who at the time I spoke to her for Entertainment Weekly, she's Goodwill Ambassador for Finca International that works to help, women in developing countries, to develop their economic, sustainability. And she was talking, when I said, how's it feel to help these women? And she said, oh, well, it's not as much for them as it is for me. And what I find is that a lot of these celebrities, the Jane Fondas, Natalie Portmans, not all celebrities, let me clarify, but a lot of them find they get there, they have all this money, they're famous, and that the only thing that really gives them meaning and connection and community is doing work that then goes on to somehow, help a cause or help others. So I feel like, maybe we can all skip trying to get famous and rich and realize that it's right in front of us.
The service
is that kind
mentality.
of meaning. Yeah,
absolutely. The service mentality that ushers us, why be on the planet really at the end of the day if we're not uplifting other people and trying to make life for all of humanity better.
Yep.
Oh, my goodness, there's so much there. I'm going to swing back to the notion of pain and, the complete and utter edge of every day of that, the good is lovely and the light is lovely, but it is the darker things that are what propel us to learn and to grow. And, that's a great segue into where we are with, women's rights in our country today. And well, actually, before I do that, I do want to back up, but we'll circle back to that using pain and women's rage and our traumas to propel us to make changes. But I want to go back to the book. Again, it was published in 2013, and reading it on the beach, I was overwhelmed by the hope that was palpable in everyone's interview. It was unbelievable. And then, so it's 3 years before the 2016, the big election with Hillary, and what transpired. And so then another election in 2020 has transpired. And of course, the Me Too movement and such. So what are your thoughts on your book? What are your thoughts on the book since everything that has transpired? What are your thoughts about circling back to the book, about what's transpired since then in terms of the inspiration that was in that book?
Well, I mean, certainly it was hugely, I don't know what to say. I mean, obviously, I think we thought maybe we would have a woman president. My book would be dated.
Totally. It was in that book. It was totally in that book.
What happened. Yeah. However, we did get to see, and for all, I mean, she won the popular vote. She
totally did.
So little girls all over the world and boys too. This is, got to see a woman almost get there, and we have made strides since then. It's slow. So I'm like an optimistic, hopeful person. I do think, and we also have our, first female and woman of color vice president, Kamala Harris. So I just am celebrating all the wins and the milestones that we are. I just talked about, Cori Bush, who's, we're still we're in for the long game. Let's put it that way.
We are totally
and those we still need to look at the obstacles identified in my book.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
And when we come, we've got to go to break. When we come back, we will talk about that women's rage and using that fire and moving us forward, and women's power, and your take on where we think women's leadership is today and where it needs to go. And then, of course, we're going to jump into your podcast, your incredible podcast, when we come back with Marianne Schnall on the edge of everyday. Stay tuned.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauvert, employment law business law attorney and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Chipping around, kick my brain to the ground. These are the days it never rained, but it pours
On the edge of every day. And we are back with Marianne Schnall. So doing my lovely research on you, I was reminded of this quote: when sleeping women wake, mountains move. And certainly pain, trauma, Me Too movement, the former president, all of these things have inspired us to all begin to wake up. So what are your thoughts on the status of women's rights here and internationally?
Take a deep breath on that one.
I know. And we understand you're not an oracle.
Well, I mean, let's put it this way. It's really concerning. It's always been concerning. I certainly think that, well, first of all, here in the United States, because I actually think there's some, obviously the overturning of Roe v. Wade is so huge. The implications of that, I mean, I can barely breathe about it. Right. So there are so many levels that, going back 50 years and all of the implications, and we're only just beginning to see, I can't understand why this isn't more of a being covered in the news about how that is affecting.
That's a whole show. That's a whole show with you.
No, well, exactly. So we don't even have enough time, but that to me is absolutely, talk about women being enraged, and we're seeing that, and we're seeing women, turning out for these primaries and what happened in Kansas. Women are going to vote.
Surprising turning around.
Yeah. And then, and also women are still, nobody's really talking about it, but the pandemic really leveled a serious blow on women in the workplace. Women had to, a lot of women left the workforce. We're already, the numbers and the inequity was so glaring. And by the way, everything I'm talking about when we talk about women, I just want to really underscore, are always worse exacerbated for women of color. So no matter what we're talking about, it's always really important to keep that in mind. So there are just, violence against women, there are so many serious problems that women face. And then when you look internationally, you're seeing the same thing happen exactly in Iran. The only thing I'll say is that when you see women taking to the streets, and actually standing up in defiance.
And with men too.
Men too. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and so, right, in Iran and Afghanistan, I just reposted, talking about my podcast, I resurfaced, it was Jimmy Carter's 98th birthday on Saturday. So I had interviewed him about, the status, the discrimination and abuse of women. He had written a whole book about it. And it was such a reminder of we forget what goes on with, honor killings, rape as a weapon of war, female infanticide, and all of the many forms
genital mutilation, all of it.
Exactly.
All of it.
He talks about all that. And I think it's a real symptom of, just women as second-class citizens. But I'm glad you said the thing about the fact that it was also Jimmy Carter. This is not a quote women's issue. We need women in the streets, but we need men in the streets. We're all interconnected. We should all care about these issues.
This is a human issue.
Exactly.
It's a human issue.
Yes.
This is what boggles my mind. Women in power, men, so many evolved men
Yes.
understand that they don't want this toxic masculinity. They
Oh,
want empowered women, and they want to be free to not be that stereotype of that crazy toxic masculine.
Well, I have to say, I'm in the middle of doing a piece that should probably be up by next week. I interviewed, I don't know if you know who Justin Baldoni is. He's a book, no podcast, Man Enough, Don McPherson, former NFL veteran, Ted Bunch from A Call to Men. And I'm learning that toxic masculinity, the new term, well, I think even Don McPherson was talking about aspirational masculinity. There's nothing inherently wrong in being a man or a boy or having masculine traits. It's about how to, like Justin Baldoni talks about, redefining masculinity. Because yeah, as you said, men are just as impacted by constrictive gender roles as women are. So we do need to have them be part of this conversation, or we're never really going to get to see the change that we need to see for all genders.
Amen. Well, that's a good seg. We can go on and on about that, but I do want to get to change makers and shift makers. And I wanted to talk with you about shift makers. And where's my, so, yes. Do you see an evolution or a rising of consciousness? I love that question. Do you see? And you know, your podcast is called Shift Makers. What honestly, what to you does being a shift maker mean?
Oh my God. Well, you're a shift maker. So a shift maker to me is somebody who is helping to usher in new paradigm shifts in the world that are absolutely, necessary to, all I can say is I don't think it's ever been more clear with all of the signs from Mother Nature. We're living through pandemics and climate change. And then there's like school shootings and wars and all the inequities that we see that how do you say this nicely? The human race is a little dysfunctional at the moment.
Yes.
Maybe I'm saying it nicely. Maybe we might want to try some new paradigms.
Yes,
some of those
indeed.
new paradigms might be realizing our interdependence with each other and the earth. You started
our
your
common
show with
unity,
this.
common unity, our world community.
World community, exactly. And that means of all beings. Humans aren't the all-knowing, like we're at the top. No, there is a natural divine, like look at, can we prevent the hurricane? No. Could we prevent the pandemic? There's an intelligence that we need to work with, and we need to work with each other. I remember asking, maybe it was Jane Goodall, like, do you think we forget that we're on a planet spinning in space? Like we literally are, this is our home, and we are family on this home with all living beings. And so that's why anybody who, Jane Goodall represents a shift, interdependence with, the earth and the animals, or, somebody like President Carter, or, even Kimberly Crenshaw talking about, intersectionality, or, all of these people that represent sort of shifts in our thinking.
About the structures on the planet that need to break down.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Oh my. And again, that's another program.
But it's all hopeful. So shift makers, what I'm trying to do is say the more people who don't say, oh my God, it's like Armageddon, the end of the world. Right. And the more people are like, oh, there's a shift happening. We're evolving our consciousness. That has power and that can grow. And I really, truly believe that can save the future of the planet.
It's the edge of every day. The willingness to be real about the things that are working and the things that aren't working. The darker aspects, the shadow aspects, and I talk about racism as being a collective shadow. And misogyny as a collective shadow, the willingness for everyone to get on board and to talk about it. And we're seeing the structures, the paradigms, your word, are cracking and are shifting and are changing. So what is your advice? I always talk about the biggest fear, one of the biggest fears of the biggest edges is the fear of change. And what would be your advice to how do you deal with your fear of change? What advice would you give to other people about being more embracing of change in today's world?
I mean, to me, I don't think there's just like what we're talking about. I think everybody can see change is needed. And, I mean, to me, that's kind of the meaning of life of like, is sort of us evolving individually and collectively. So I would think that we all sort of want the same things, I feel,
Totally. Well, but I think so. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So, by the way, one of the things I was going to say, because I always wear it like this, I had asked Gloria Steinem if there was a phrase to put on a bracelet, which it benefits my organization, feminist.com. And she came up with the phrase, which means a lot to her. We are linked, not ranked. We are linked, not ranked. And to me, that has always been such an important, framework for sort of having this conversation of just, talking about paradigm shifts. But to me, it feels good to feel that way, because there's so much I mean, I don't think anybody wants it to keep going the way that it's going. Like, I feel like we all would welcome change. So I guess, just going with the flow. And it seems like we know that we need to break through into something. I think change will feel much better than with the stress that we're living under now.
It's connected. I see it connected to the consciousness, the raising of the consciousness, of course, that you're promoting, of course, in your show and shiftmakers. And hopefully I'm promoting in this, that, and it gets back to a sense of internal work, of getting real with that the only constant in life is change.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I see some people as being very wired to be more accepting and more curious and actually interested in change, and some people being more wired to be more incredibly fearful of change and wanting to hang on to these old paradigms and these old structures. So I find that to be a real conundrum.
Well, we can't control
when I deal
everybody.
with people.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's that like I've started to learn on focusing on the people, like, let's boost our signal. There's some people that aren't going to change, but also like
just going to get it.
Having compassion for those people that they're fearful, and whatever programming, or like also just realizing like there's something to it. It's not sometimes in their control. Sometimes it is, but also like, I think not wasting energy on trying to change people that for whatever reason aren't going to change. Let's all boost our, signal.
Uplift our signal, indeed. And, as an interfaith minister, I always say, we're bridge builders, and I should be wanting to have these conversations with people that QAnon people. But no, I said, those kinds of conversations, I can't. No, we have to be dealing with the same facts. And I think modeling comfort with change is a more powerful stance for me to take. And certainly that's what the stance that you have in your life and in your podcast, and all of your guests, all of the interviews that I've listened to, all talk about the embrace of change and the inevitability of change.
And that also means, in like my interview with Oprah, which I interviewed her about her documentary Belief, about the commonalities across all religions. But, the reminder of like what you were saying, it does start with like your internal world, and just, you have to start there, and find time for that too. Because I think there's so many inputs that are overwhelming. And I think, it's that the be the change thing is also just realizing you first have to take care of your own, spaceship.
I like that, spaceship. I totally like that. I'm stealing that. Well, that's a great place for us to take a break. And when we come back, I'm going to ask you, how do you stay balanced and how do you stay hopeful? And when we come back with Marianne Schnall on the edge of every day, we'll get to that, and we'll get to her leading edge when we come back. Stay tuned.
Hey, everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
In a post-COVID world, you may have many unanswered questions regarding your health. Are you looking to live a healthier lifestyle? Do you have a desire to learn more about mental health and enhance your quality of life? Or do you just want to participate in self-understanding and awareness? I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each Thursday, I will tackle these questions and work to enlighten you. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will be frank about health to advocate for all of us.
Calling all pet lovers.
Pet Avengers, assemble!
On the Professionals and Animal Lovers show, we believe the bond between animal lovers is incredibly strong. It mirrors that bond between pets and their owners. Through this program, we come together to learn, educate, and advocate.
Join us live every Wednesday at 2 p.m. at talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Chipping around, kick my brain to the ground. These are the days it never rained, but it pours
On the edge of every day. And we are back with Marianne Schnall. Before we get into how do you keep balanced and hopeful, Marianne, I do want to connect to your bracelet one more time, because I'm thrilled to tell you I read about it and I ordered one. What is the phrase again?
We are linked, not ranked.
So what does you started to say what that meant to you, but specifically, more specifically, it was created by Gloria Steinem. What's the message with that?
To me, it's everything that we're talking about. It's that sense that there is no hierarchy, that we are
the word
all.
I wanted to hear. Yes,
no hierarchy. To me, it's across, all the many false divides that we, are often use to divide us or rank us. So
or
whether
other us, all of it.
Exactly, all of them: race, gender, class, ability, sexuality, religion, whatever, global divides, but also with the earth, with the animals, right?
Indeed.
It's to me, the more I've thought about it, the more profound it gets.
Yes.
And I love that it was sort of Gloria having to figure out how to put her core philosophy, the world she wanted, just to fit on a bracelet. And I've heard her say it, many times since. And it just, I feel like, that would be, if I had to have a motto of the change that would really help where we are right now, it would be to understand that.
Yeah,
it's very profound.
And to purchase one of these is on your website, Marianne.
It's out. We are linked, not ranked.com. Yes.
Okay. Yes. And
Yes,
and the link is on your website as well.
Yes. And in addition to supporting my organization, 25% also goes to Gloria's foundation too. So, and she loves the bracelets, which makes me so happy, also. And then I just wear them to remind me of the message and for good luck, and because they're pretty.
They're gorgeous. And that's why I ordered one. For all of those reasons, to remind myself. I loved reading about the message, how it was created.
Oh yeah, you have to, because it
powerful.
actually came from this whole Imagine project. Started with Yoko Ono, and it was Imagine. You can read the whole thing of how it evolved, but yeah.
So
and one day
spectacular.
I'd love to have even more products and all different things, because I'd love to see everybody with this message.
Amen. Amen. So again, how do you, Marianne, stay balanced and hopeful in these tumultuous times? And what advice would you have for your younger self?
Wow, these are all questions like I ask other people. I'm not used to answering them myself. Okay, let me think. Well, it's a constant practice. It's, it's not something you can perfect, and I'm better some days than others.
I see you as
we said, like today, when the tree, fell in the backyard, knocked down the whole swing set, and the phones weren't working. One of the things is like going with the flow a little bit. Just like, and also just like we were talking about having gratitude. Okay, didn't hit the house, didn't hurt anybody, like trying to have perspective, gratitude. That's an ongoing thing. But I really have to find time, especially in all of the busyness, because I definitely can feel like I need to like save the world every second of every day, is to take time for myself. And like, I do try to like meditate in all forms. I do try to like take a walk. I highly recommend going out and being in nature. I find that such a reminder of just like
what's important.
What's important, but also the magic and beauty and mystery and spirituality. Maybe it's because I grew up in the city. I'm still like, oh my God, like a butterfly and the birds and the trees changing colors. It's incredible. So I think those are some of the ways. And then just, constantly checking my thoughts, because, I feel like that's also just, we were talking about before, cultivating a relationship with my inner world to see how I'm doing. And then also like remembering to breathe. And lastly, apparently I have a whole book on this, but controlling, just controlling the amount of inputs and what inputs you have, because it's really tempting to kind of be on your phone and everything all the time, and just making sure that you take some time for, just silence and reflection.
Yeah.
And the advice for my younger self would be the advice that, I, two things, and they're also things I say to my daughters, and they're also made their way into like my book, like Dare to Be You for Girls. One is don't care so much what other people think, because I was obsessed with what everybody thought. Trying to fit in and be popular takes away your power. And every major like big leader who I've talked to talks about, I remember saying to Nancy Pelosi, like, it doesn't bother you. People are always saying, she's like, oh, that's their problem. Like, really, you can't be a good leader and please everybody. So just like please yourself.
You can't speak your voice.
Yes. And then my first book, which is a book of quotes, was called Daring to Be Ourselves. And this is Dare to Be You for Girls. Be you. We think we should try to fit in and be like everybody else. No, it's your uniqueness. It's what makes you different is actually the thing you want to cultivate, not to fit in. That's your gift. That's your calling. My two daughters are so different. They're both doing incredible things, in the world. And it's because that's what I try to develop in them, is just helping them be true to themselves and celebrate what it is that they uniquely have, to offer. So those are some things.
Oh, beautiful. Absolutely. Well, and you're just such a powerful mentor for young people, because I would think because of your daughters that you can talk that language, and you've written this book. It's very moving.
I learn from them, all the time. People are always like, oh, they must get so much from you. And I'm just like, literally, they inspire me all the time. I mean, yeah, Lotus inspired a whole book, but like, I'm so glad younger people give me hope. They really, see the world, in a much more holistic, intersectional way.
Yes.
Than some of us older generations.
Yeah, indeed. Well, hey, we're working on it.
Yes, we are.
I'm so moved by what you were saying, and I'm thinking of myself as a young person and trying so hard to be perfect and nice, and this whole notion that to be a leader, and it's particularly socialized for females, this notion of being nice. No, to be kind. And in today's turbulent, to our point about reaching out across to people that want to move us backwards, we can still be kind and be very forceful in our speaking our truth and speaking our voice. And in particular, young women need to hear this.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, more than ever, we're definitely being called, to use our voices. And that was the one point that Maya Angelou made in both my interviews, was the importance of courage. She said that without courage, you can't practice any other virtue, consistently. And in today's times, we need women who are often told, as you were saying, to please and be nice and not make trouble and, sort of back into a corner. No, and we're seeing it though. So as you said, if anything's come out of the turmoil of these past years, it has been, it has really woken us all up, but particularly women are,
connecting to their hearts. Yes. Courage, your heart, connecting to our heart and what we're most compassionate and passionate about with passion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, I have a million more questions, Marianne Schnall, but of course we are coming to the end of our hour. So I am going to stop and invite you to come back again another time. I'd like to continue this conversation in our future. And to thank you so much for being on the show tonight.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, and thank you for the show, because this is, exactly, shift making. I really appreciate, I resonate with the message of the show and what you're trying to do, and grateful for our longtime connection.
Indeed, me too. So where can we find you? MarianneSchnall.com.
Yes.
And so is that's the best spot, or?
Well, yes.
All things lead to MarianneSchnall.com.
All my articles and books are there. Shiftmakers is my podcast, my platform, whatwillitTake.com, feminist.com, which will be going through a whole, what should I call it, like reimagining soon. But yes, Marianne Schnall, a little bit of a Wild West right now, but it's being redesigned. But you can find links to just about anything you might need to know.
Right. And you're also on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and all of those places. You are ubiquitous. You are everywhere.
You have to be. Not saying I.
Yes, you must be. You're right. You must be in today's
no,
world.
because I'm using my platform to spread all these important messages. You have to do what you got to do to get the word out. So
absolutely.
If I have to tweet every once in a while, I'll do it.
We can take a break from our phones, and then an hour later, back on there, getting the message out.
I'm thankful. We're all finding each other, kindred spirits. So
indeed. Yeah. Well, I for those of you who are listening in, I thank you so much. As you know, each and every day, we are always at the edge of the miraculous. So again, I thank you, Marianne. One last nugget of wisdom before we say goodbye.
Realize that right now, anything you do, well, first of all, vote. Any change.
There you go. First of all, that's the nugget.
Well,
hello.
But also one last thing, as Jane Goodall said, everything that you do every day makes a difference. So decide what type of difference you're going to make, what you say, what you buy, what media you can consume, and companies you support, who you vote for, everything you do. So just to be more aware, so we can all together work to, make a better world for us all.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
To those listening in, we will see you next week. Remember again, always at the edge of the miraculous.
This is our last dance. This is our last dance. This is ourselves under pressure.